Okay, so I put the method in the box for you. I love the first step. It's guess and check. First step is we're going to use factor theorem to find one factor. We're going to pick and choose numbers until we find one that when we substitute in that, we get 0. Once we have one of the factors, then we're going to go to step 2, and we're going to use synthetic division. Once we have the synthetic division answer, we're going to factor it, and then we're done. So the first step is literally guess and check. We need to find a number that when we sub into there, we get 0. So typically we start with 1. If it doesn't work, we go to -1. If it doesn't work, we go to 2. If it doesn't work, we go to -2. Rarely have I seen them on the exam give a question where the first one is 8, for example, or 7, or a really big number. The first factor is usually 1, -1, 2, -2, something in there. So in our head, before we write anything down, let's just use 1. Okay, so if I put a 1 in here, 1. And if I put a 1 in here, -2. And if I put a 1 in here, and 6. So 1 minus 2, -1, minus 5, plus 6, 0. So that tells us f of 1 is going to work and be our first factor. It doesn't mean 1 is always going to work, but usually the first factor is a fairly low number. What that tells us is the first factor is x plus 1. I meant x minus 1. Where did the minus come from? Yeah, because we know that that's equal to 0, and then we just moved it over. So we would have had x equals 1, so moving it over to the other side gives us x minus 1. Okay, so that's step number 1. First is guess and check. Pick a number. When you put it in, is going to give you 0 at the end. Step number 2, once we've got one of the factors, we're going to use synthetic division to find the other. So upside down division sign. What goes on the outside? What goes on the inside? And I'm just going to grab my red pen. There's 2 things we always check at this point. What did we talk about on Friday? 2 things to watch for. Are we missing any terms? And what do we do if we are? Mm-hmm. And what was the second thing we had to watch for? If it's in order. Okay. Start with the highest exponent, go all the way down to the constant. Now I should note, you could, if you wanted to in this step, do long division. It works, it'll give you the answer, just nobody does because this is so much easier. Okay, walk me through synthetic division. Thank you, April, very quietly talking when nobody else is talking. Offer of -1? Okay. This number right here has to be 0. If it's not 0, you've done something wrong. How do we know that it has to be 0? Because we already found the remainder right up there, and we know that it's a factor. So if you're in step 2 and you don't get 0 as the constant, you've made a mistake somewhere, usually with a sign, or you've put the numbers in the wrong order or something like that, because it has to be 0. Okay, we get their answer from the bottom, and what do we know about the degree of the answer compared to the degree of the question? Okay, so the answer is 1x squared minus x minus 6. Step number 3, we just need to factor this guy if we can. Sometimes you can't, but most of the time you can. Offer of x minus 3x plus 2. Confirm. And step number 4 is just writing all the factors together. So the first factor we had way in step number 1, way up top, was x minus 1. Other factor is x minus 3. And the other factor is x plus 2. There's factoring a cubic. How so? But where do you get this from?
That's what I mean by taking a guess, but instead of solving it, like the analogy for you is this method.
This is one of the steps. So this is step number 2. Okay. Be careful when you get to the last step. And what happened is we kind of poisoned your mind in grade 11 is because we solved quadratics. And we always factored, and then we split and solved. That's because the question usually said find the roots, find the intercepts, solve. If the question just says factor, your answer should be binomials. So we're not going one step further and actually solving this when the question says factor. If the question said solve, like it will tomorrow, then we'll go the one step further and actually put x equals. But if it says factor, you should have a series of binomials. Now, when we factor a quadratic from grade 11, we usually get 2 binomials. How many binomials did we get when we solved a cubic? What do you think we're going to get when we solve a quartic? Quintic. Number 6. Quartic. Step number 1. Okay, again, usually we start with 1. So let's sub in 1 and see what happens. Yep, it's huge, lots of terms. We're just going to go term by term. So 1 to the 4th, 1 cubed, negative 7 times 1 squared, 15 times 1. Now, without actually finding the number, we already know that we didn't have the right factor. Because if we add 15 and 18, what are we going to get? 33, and we know here we're only going to have negative 10. So I don't really care what the final answer is. All I know is it's not 0. Okay, what would you like to try for a second value? Okay. Negative 1 to the 4th. Negative 1 cubed times minus 3. So do the negative 1 cubed first. Okay, so negative 1 times negative 3. Negative 1 squared. 1 times minus 7. Minus 7. 15 times negative 1. And 18 by itself. Okay, so I tend to put the negatives together first. I don't know, it's just the way my brain works. So negative 7 and negative 15. Then my brain puts all the positives together. So 1 plus 3 plus 18. Ooh, and then we're happy. Why are we happy? Whew. What does that tell you about minus 1? And what would the actual factor be? And I like to just write it here, because what happens is when we get down to the last step when we're factoring is people will forget about this first factor. So I like to write it down so it's bright, it's red, I can see it when I get my final answer. Okay, step 2. What do we do now that we found a factor? Okay, minus 1 on the outside. Inside the division. What are the 2 things we check for? Order and missing terms. Do we have the correct order? Are we missing anything in between? Okay. Try the synthetic division. Where? What? Who? What? How did I know there was an error before I even found what it was? Right, so if you don't get out 0, it means you've done something wrong because we know the remainder should be 0. Okie doke. Why does it start with an x cubed? Mm-hmm. Okay, step 3 is factor this. Oh, wait, how do we factor a cubic? We start over again. Whew, what's going to happen when we do a quintic? Yeah, okay, so we're back to step 1 because it's another polynomial. Guess and check. What number would you like to pick? Okay, so 1 cubed, 1 minus 4 minus 3 plus 18. So we're going to have positive 1, positive 18, which is 19. We're going to have negative 7, probably not going to work. Okay, let's try 2. By the way, mathematicians, we hate factoring higher order polynomials. We think this is way too much work. 2 cubed, 2 squared times negative 4. Ooh, I heard a bunch of answers there. Okay. 3 times negative 2. And plus 18. Okay, so I always put the negatives together first. I don't know why, just the way my brain works. Minus 22, I heard somebody say. 8 plus 18. And then we're kind of sad. Crap. What does that tell us about 2? Not a factor. Okay, what else would you like to try? Ooh, let's go back to negative 1. Okay, already, right, we know it's not going to work. Crap.
So you could basically do this forever.
Yep, we could do it forever.
It's plus 16. Plus 16.
Why? Already we got 8s and 6s. This might be good. Yay! And yes, I feel the same way as you when I finally get one that works. What's the factor? And again, I like to write it down just because sometimes at the end we forget about the ones that we used in step 1. Oh, we're not even done yet. Okay, what do we do with this? Or long division if you're feeling particularly adventurous. Okay, what do we put on the outside? What do we put on the inside? So just make sure you're going back to the right step. What am I trying to factor in all of this? The cubic, right? Because this is what I ended up with after the quadrat, or the quartic. Okay, so 1. Just confirm those are the correct. Are they in the right order? Do we have any missing terms? Oh, you missed one negative in the first step and you've blown the whole question. I was just so excited it was 0, I missed that. Are we done? No, we're only on step 3. But doesn't quadratic seem really easy now that you've done quartics? When you get to this, you're like, yes, I can factor this. Confirm?
Yep.
Now, how would we actually write that? Because we wouldn't write it as x minus 3, x minus 3.
X minus 3 squared.
Okay. No. So that's one of our factors. We had our x minus 2, which again is why I write it in red and really obvious, because we tend to forget them. We had our x minus 1. So now we just finish it up. So f of x equals x plus 1 times x plus 2 times x minus 3 squared. And if it's a quartic, we probably should have 4 binomials, so it's a little check at the end. Do we have 4 binomials? But I see 3. 1, 2, 3. But squared we know is the same. There's factoring higher order polynomials.